Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Boring to Badass, where we're helping B2B marketers like yourselves learning how to bring what is traditionally boring brands in the B2B space into badass brands. And so the topic today is really interesting. And to kick that off, I want you to think about the last time you made a big purchase, especially if it was one where that involved multiple people, maybe spouses, siblings, anything where you had to kind of work together and figure out that purchase. That research, the stress, the second guessing, it's fun, right? Like it can be a journey. But in the end, we all feel those same emotions regardless of who you are. We've all gone through those. And as marketers, we love to think about that buying journey for our customers and what they're experiencing. But the reality is, like, traditional methods of creating and measuring those journeys is kind of flawed. And that's really why I'm excited to have Ryan Paul Gibson on the show today. He specializes in helping B2B businesses conduct successful client interviews. He's personally interviewed over 1,900 people in his career. And what makes Ryan's approach so unique and successful is how he focuses on the entire buying journey, which is what we're going to really dive into today. So thank you, Ryan, for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's to go like from boring to badass is a momentous task, so I applaud you for the effort.
Thanks. Yeah, it's one of those, right? As anyone knows, it's a process. You're not just
Yeah.
going to do it overnight. So learning all these different things here and there, and that's really what I hope the show does for people is you learn little bits here and there and you start piecing them together, and then over time that makes that huge transitional difference. And so talking about kind of the journey anyway, and kind of wrapping that into it. Let's go and start kind of at the base level of understanding the entire buyer's journey. So I know that's one of the things that you've talked about, and you have like in your profile and all that is the entire journey, right? So what do you mean by the entire journey?
Well, so B2B is a really interesting space, right? And there, I think at a fundamental level, how consumers make choices in markets is pretty similar across the board, whether it's B2B or B2C. How they really define them are often heavily considered purchases or less considered purchases. So a higher considered purchase would be a house or a car, college investment, or your college career. In B2B, some enterprise software, manufacturing equipment for industrial plant, what have you. Less considered are bottles of water, where you go eat fast food, what calendar schedule you use for your sales team, maybe, or something really easy, like something that's sort of a product led, is what we call it now, from a software component, or some, um, if I swag for my business, right? There might be less considerations there. So those are how we sort of think of things. Where I like to start is where that consideration starts happening, even slightly before that. So I posted about this the other day on LinkedIn. You know, one of the ways I like to think about B2B purchases is they support a process, like a business process that people are trying to improve at some point in time, and they've decided they want to invest money into improving that process. Well, I like to understand, like, what happened before that. What was happening in the business that they gradually decided that, okay, we're going to spend budget this year to improve X. Why? Like, what went into that decision? What were the conditions within the business? What was the environment that was happening? And that there was a catalyst there. And the reason I like to start there for marketing is where you start to influence a buyer's decision and probably get on their consideration set of options down the line, because they may not be ready to buy now, but anyone who's spent any time in B2B can tell you sometimes it takes 2 or 3 years for someone to go from, oh, this company is interesting, I'll maybe think about them one day, to them actually, investing capital or investing budget into your solution. So that's where, when I say the buying journey, that's where I'd like to start.
Cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because I feel like some of the traditional information out there on buyer's journey is, like a lot of times they'll say, oh, it starts when the buyer identifies that they have a problem, but really it starts even before that, like to your point of just even knowing about who you are, even if they're not considering you at that moment, just becoming aware of you and the services you offer. Um, and one of the things too you talked about was the buying environment. Can you
Mhm.
elaborate a little bit on like what that is, why it's important?
Yeah, so it's if I remember correctly, and lead me, Justin, if I've misremembered. Um, but I like to think of it as like, what are all the elements of information you need to know that buyers consider when they're making a decision, or impact or influence. So an example would be, what is their business model? How do they make money in the first place? Which sounds almost too high level, but it's a business to business transaction. You're trying to help them achieve their outcome. So how do they make money? What's their process for that? What are the roles and responsibilities and priorities of your buyer? Not necessarily like all of them, but contextually within, where your solution fits. How they prioritize things, like where do they put their time? And then what have been their approaches before to try and solve the problem? For example, one of the cliches in B2B is that people use spreadsheets for everything. And there's a reason for that, because it's on a continuum of improvement for processes. If I'm an early stage, I'm a small business, and um, I don't want to pay $2,000 a month for some type of tool that maybe tracks all my leads, I might just use Google Sheets for the first 2 to 3 years. And then eventually, as I hit a threshold of either operational, like from an operation standpoint, everything's breaking, or I've really skyrocketed my revenue and I need to keep track of things, what have you, then I'll start to decide, right, about what I want to do next. So the environment that you're trying to understand is not just your own environment, but the environment of the buyer around them and how they make decisions and what is that process they go through to actually understand and evaluate what their options are in a market. I hope that was it. Tell me if I was off.
No, no, that makes sense. What are some common elements that typically are present in a buyer's environment that influence like their purchasing decision or the organization's purchasing decision as a whole?
So there's a few things, right? The first is when you look at when they start building a list of like sometimes we call it consideration set, sometimes we call it a short list, but it's really who do they think is a business that is relevant and credible to their needs in their industry, in their role, and in the processes they're trying to improve. So they look, are they a relevant business? Do they use the words I use? Are they solving similar problems for other types of customers or helping other ways? So they're looking for credibility, right? They're looking to understand like what the budget is that they are working with, because different solutions, you look at different solutions based on budget. Maybe I want to outsource an entire part of my business to someone for a managed service provider, or I actually just want to find a tool that will do this one thing, right? Um, my fellow colleagues, like what are their needs, and what are they looking for? What do they need to get done? Where they align with me? What things integrate with, right? Terms and conditions. Who else has used it? What peers of mine have used these things? What are the reviews online? What are the reviews that they have on their own website? And what are the real reviews that I can find on like Reddit or G2, where people aren't actually using marketing speak to sort of cloud what's happening? They're actually giving you real hot takes on how a solution works. When you boil it down, though, Justin, like I'm actually over 2,000 interviews now. I should update my own stats,
Yeah.
but they it really comes down to when they start that journey, they look for things that, okay, I have a are they giving me information in their marketing that's helping me do things beyond just what the solution is, but helps my business and gives me value? Are they relevant? Are they credible? And then are they doing things to stay top of mind? Right? Until I'm ready to buy. So that is really, and then when you get down to like a sales level, it's all the things we talk about, feature sets, price points, transactional type stuff where I'm picking, okay, I like their price better, but I like these terms and conditions better, right? It's at that beginning, especially where brand lives, where it's all these other intangibles that we don't think of on a day-to-day basis that really hook people and keep them interested in your business and like the solutions you have to offer.
Very cool. What are some ways that as marketers we can try to get insights in understand what that buying environment is like for our potential like ICP, our ideal client person, like in profile. Like
Yeah.
how do we get some of that information, right? How do we get those insights?
I'll tell you how I do it, and my process is not unique in any stretch. There's similar people that do what I do, different types of methodologies. One's called like jobs to be done. There's another one called like business canvas or lean canvas. It's been around like the Silicon Valley crowd for a long time now. And there's other older styles of like business development, right? They've been around since the 50s. What I like to do in a B2B environment, if we get back to that mindset of, okay, well, we support a process. I like to understand where it starts, like how does that process start? What is that process for? How do you get it done? What was happening before? And then what were all the steps and iterations and obstacles and ways that you discovered that our solution was the one? So I really just, I worked, I should mention when I was I've been in B2B 21 years. I took a slight pause and became an investigative reporter for 3 years in between my business career. And becoming an investigative reporter was hands down one of the biggest skill sets I learned that's helped me with the work I do today. Because the process of investigation is very different than just a casual conversation we're having right now, right? It's all designed to unearth, actions, statements of facts, behaviors, things that transpired under the guise of one core focus or one key research objective, right? If you're talking like qualitative research. So with that said, what I like to do is I start at the beginning and I map out every single step they took, like until they got to the vendor they selected and they bought from. And it sounds almost, you know, trite and silly, but it's the best way to sort of understand that buying journey because that's how it unfolded from the lens of the buyer. And there's a whole process to do that, whole methodology, but that's really what I do. Start at the beginning and you work your way to the end.
I'm really curious now is which now that I know you've done that for a lot of different journeys. Is every journey unique or are there some similarities?
Absolutely, yeah. Because the variables are there's so many more variables, right? You look at it from a high level, and that's sort of where I've been speaking, there are trends and patterns. They look towards businesses that are relevant and credible. They look to businesses that solve problems that they're encountering, look for their peers and so on. But the key thing to understand is as you dig in, the vocabulary, the nuances, the descriptions they use, their own individual processes, because not every business is the same. Um, and the business models and all those things impact how they solve problems. Let me give you a really good example. So if I'm a CTO, a chief technology officer of a software company and has 1,000 software engineers, how I solve something like my disaster recovery strategy, which is a function within like an IT and DevOps department about it, like how they ensure that all their systems stay running and online and they can access everything they need. My strategy for that and who's in the room and who helps is much different than if I'm an IT director at a hospital with 5 engineers that are helping me build like, really old legacy software products internally for my hospital. They might even have the same, it could be the same title, chief technology officer, right? But I guarantee you their roles and how they solve problems and everything they do are very, very different.
Hmm.
So that's why this work's so vital because, yeah, there's trends that are, I think fundamental or, you see time and time again in the B2B space. But you need to really dig into your ICP, your ideal customer's profile, because there's so many nuances and specific things that you're going to use to help you, sell into that market.
Very cool. Yeah, so it just makes me think of like I have a bunch of questions now on that too. So you know, I guess at what point, because you talked about like those CTOs and the fact that they would like the titles are the same, but the challenges and their goals and everything are probably completely different. Um,
Mhm.
as marketers, and we think about who our ICP is, and we try to build that out, like what I guess kind of like what kind of data, what things should we be trying to pull out and get information on even before we start customer interviews? But like, what can we do to start to kind of understand that before we even get to that next deeper level?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll tell you about a project I just ran. And y- my my job in what I do with content lift is I have to learn about businesses really fast because my job is then go interview their customers about why they bought from this company. So you have to be able to really, you know, get the essence of things quickly. And the great thing is technology is there for us today for us to be able to do that. How I did that was one, talk to my client. You can talk to the internal sales team or the product team, customer success team, and a lot of people who do my type of work, or people who do copywriting and branding. They'll do that. They'll talk to the internal teams to get the lay of the land. What you can then do in today's day and age, communities, that are you name a profession or a vertical, there's a community for it. I guarantee you. We called them trade associations 40 years ago. Now it's, the IT hour or the IT group. That's not a great idea name, but you get it, right? Like I'm in 10 marketing communities that are run by either by Slack or some other type of, group software, and we're all in there talking about marketing. And that happens for verticals as well. Construction, healthcare, finance. That's one way. What I did with this company, to sort of help lay the groundwork is my job was to sell into figure out how structural engineers spec a certain type of product for a certain type of construction project, structural engineering project. So I found a subreddit where 10,000, no, 80,000 structural engineers hang out. And I just posted a bunch of questions in there about, hey, this is the thing. When do you use this thing and why would you use it? And I'm just getting all these answers with all the words they use, why they would use it and when. That informed a lot of the questions that I could go in and ask these structural engineers as I got them on the phone and started talking to them. Right. So there's all these different ways you can do that now. Even with like I'm gonna say this, but like ChatGPT, or like Perplexity is a really good one. It's a search engine that has AI attached to it. It'll sort, if you ask really good questions, it'll source all these different articles around a specific topic, and you can go and read those articles further and so on and so forth. So those are all different ways that you can start to like lay the groundwork. But until you actually go in and try to understand the point of view, the contextual worldview, the mindset, how these people think, you're only still going to have like one piece of the puzzle about how the people make decisions.
Cool. So when you then do the other piece, right, and you do the customer interviews and you're getting all that in-depth information, I imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's probably a lot of data that comes from that, right? There's a
Yeah,
lot of stuff.
absolutely.
Um, what are some ways that we should be like what's the best ways to kind of analyze that data and understand that data in a way that allows us to get real insights without trying to think of the way to phrase it, but essentially almost without giving like leading to confirmation bias or other stuff, like, because data can tell
Yeah.
you pretty much whatever you want if you manipulate it certain ways. So it's like, how do we kind of keep that away from it as we go through the data to actually get the real information we need?
Yeah. So I have a few trains of thought there, Justin, like as supports that. The first thing to understand is like if you look at what I do from like an academic level, what I do is qualitative research, not quantitative. Quantitative with surveys, like getting data from dashboards and transactions and doing like data analysis. That's not what I do. I work on the qualitative side, sometimes subjective type of data. So one of the questions I get is, well, how people are biased and they're not going to tell you the truth and all those things. And yeah, there's a lot of research that shows that. The first thing is it comes down to actually how the process you use to do this. So that's why I stressed before, I care about actions, behaviors, statements of fact. I use a very iterative method, methodical method to try and understand how people do the things they do. I don't ask them opinions. I don't ask hypotheticals. I don't ask, what would you do if XYZ happened? Because as soon as you do that, it becomes personal opinion, subjective opinion. And that is harder to sort of, to your point, match and pattern and theme to find trends. It's because everyone's response will probably be a little different because they use different emotive words to describe, their preferences. So I like behavior statements, actions, things like that. When it gets to, yeah, there's a lot of data. Second thing is to, I should say, or another thing I should say is I don't try to remember anything. I record everything like we're doing now. Because there's no possible way your brain has the cognitive load to remember everything that's said in a half hour to 40-minute discussion. You cannot do it. It is impossible. You think you can, you will not. You'll probably like get key little glimmers of things and remember like things you thought were very interesting, but you
Mm.
won't remember everything. So I record that, and that's what qualitative researchers do. They don't rely on their memory, they rely on the tape. And then the third thing they do is there's different types of qualitative research analysis. I use one it sounds like a marketing term, but it's what it's called content analysis. And it's the most like straightforward way to do qualitative research analysis. So in essence, you're just taking, different topics or things or themes that you have found or wanted to learn and, ask questions around. Um, like, how do you talk me through the first time you needed to refresh your brand? What was happening in the business? You thought about that. What did you do next? Right? And so that could be a line of questioning. You take all the answers after you go back through the tape and you just bucket them under that one topic or those lines of questioning around how they decided they were going to start looking at improving their brand. And that's it. And you do that for each sort of subject and category of the different things you want to talk about. It sounds, again, really simplistic, but I guarantee you, when you do that and you do it sort of like analog style, rather than using like AI to sort of summarize all the thoughts,
Mm.
you, after just even 7 or 8 interviews, you'll know so much more about your ICP than you ever did at any point in the history of you running your business or running your marketing programs. I would bet money on that.
Mm.
And I've worked with a lot of marketers who've come away from doing this type of work or used like my process, and it's just they're floored with not only like what they have now, they're also like giving it to their colleagues, and people are just hitting the floor with the amount of insights they're sharing across the organization.
That's awesome. Um, can you elaborate just a little bit more on the difference between qualitative and quantitative? Just because I think sometimes
Yeah.
you touched on it, but I think sometimes people get a little confused or they'll think one is the other. And I think there's a very like good just like reason to know what that distinction is right between those two.
Yeah. So if you take on a day-to-day context, quantitative data would be like my HubSpot dashboard, Salesforce dashboard, WordPress, Google, right? Just seeing all this data come in, that is numbers, is times, is patterns of actions. All that is it's like what happened. That's what quantitative is something has happened, or it is out of 200 people, 100 say they prefer blue over red, right? Those types of things. It's very high level. There's not a lot of um, like depth to that data, but it's easy to consume and it can help you make decisions and sort of like on performance. That's one of the things I like to say is that, dashboards and CRMs don't often tell you how to do marketing. It just tells you what marketing was working. Did it work or not? It doesn't tell you what to do. Qualitative would be me are things like focus groups, one-on-one interviews, even sales calls to some extent. If you have recorded sales calls in an organization, or customer success calls, those are qualitative sources of data. And what that is people using their words to describe things, being asked a lot of maybe open-ended questions, asked about, preferences and things they did and things they like and so on, right? Um, those are like sources of qualitative data where it's not really so much numbers. It's up to you to sort of go through it and discern what's valuable or not, if that makes sense. Um, so I hope that answered the question, if that gives a
Yeah,
bit more,
no,
a
I
bit
think
more
that
light.
helps. Yeah, because like I said, I think sometimes it's easy, especially on the quantitative side, to just look at numbers all day and make
Yeah,
decisions and assumptions just based on numbers. And like you said, you're missing out a whole part of the picture if you're not doing the
yeah,
qualitative type
yeah.
research. Um,
Another way to look at it, I've heard described, if I may, quantitative tells you what, qualitative gives you the why behind the what, right?
nice.
Like, why did they even visit your web? We had 20 people, we had 2,000 people visit our website last month that for our ICP. Why? Oh, good question. Why did they? Right? And that's where that journey starts. So what I do.
Cool. To tie it back a little bit into one of the other things you mentioned was doing, you know, talking internally sometimes before you even start taking the step of talking to past clients.
Mhm.
And you mentioned like going to even the sales team sometimes. Are there things as marketers that we can do to kind of to work with sales to lead them to be either asking some of those questions, or
Yeah.
are there things that they can pick up from their conversations that would give us some of that qualitative data?
Yeah. Sales. So if you work with a sales team, um, which is, you know, it can be a very fruitful relationship. Sometimes it's not though, when we get into like our own um, corners and we sort of fight over things. But what's great about a sales team is they hear a lot of high intent conversations and high intent. So if we go back to like purchasing decisions, you know, um, there's a stage at which intent becomes higher for us to actually invest into a solution, right? So we prioritize something, we've worked through what we think the market options are, and then now we're talking to the sales team about like, okay, brass tacks here. Let's talk turkey. Um, they hear the language over and over again about like why they're coming and what they're trying to do with the solution. They don't have a lot of though of the history of what happened before that.
Hmm,
And that's where marketing needs to influence, is that journey to help bring more, qualified prospective buyers into sales. So you can start with them and ask them, questions similar. So I have a list of questions on my website. It's about 184 questions, contentleft.io, and it's for different types of research interviews or customer interviews you can have. And you can ask sales some of these key questions you would ask a customer. And often two things happen. One is they'll like, oh, that's a good question. They'll answer it, or they're like, oh, I don't know. That's a good question. I've never asked that before or thought of asking it, because they don't, because that's just not what their job is. Their job is to try and get someone to close. They're trying to close a deal. So they will either help ask you, which is often hard for them because they don't have a ton of time, right? With sales teams, there's a specific function they're trying to create, or that opens up the window for you to go and find out this data on your own, right? Because a lot of times when I work with customers, my clients, and I've heard this throughout my career, one of the pushbacks they get is, well, no, X team already talks to customers. We don't need that. We know the customer. They talk to customers. We don't need to go bother them. And I understand sort of the hesitation there because I've encountered my whole career. There's a lot of reasons why people are hesitant. The challenge is you're not helping your marketers at all, because they need to understand what was happening before it got to that sales motion so that they can actually influence that part of the journey. So yeah, the sales teams are great. I love working with sales teams. Um, and when I've been in house, I've always tried to build a really strong relationship with whoever the sales lead is, so we can work in tandem about accomplished goals. But there's only so much they can do for you,
hmm,
and a lot of it will fall on you to go out and understand these things yourself.
cool. So last question then, what are some signs that like as a marketer we need to
Mhm.
be doing the customer interviews? Like, at what point in someone's journey should they realize, hey, I really need to contact Ryan and have him help me with these customer interviews? What are some of
Yeah.
those signs?
Well, if you've never done it, then you have to do it.
Yeah.
That's one of the first signs. Um, but let me sort yeah, put it into real world examples. One of the things we often encounter is C-suites and leadership teams. They're not a fan of research because it can often what they hear is a lot of time and money spent on a report. And fair enough, because sometimes that happens and these reports go nowhere and nothing gets done with them. I've been in companies like that. And that's why I do it a different way because it drives me crazy when we have all these insights and we don't action. So I think the signs are that you have a goal in the business that's not getting achieved. Let's just take branding. Say your share of voice in the market, and share of voice for anyone that's not familiar, that's like it for if you asked 100 customers in a survey, quantitative data, so a survey, tell me about all the leading businesses in this category. If your name does not come up in any answers, you have work to do to improve your share of voice in the market. So that could be one. You're like, so Slack did this years ago. That's a really classic case. Their share of voice in the market was like, and the CMO at the time was like, well, how do we triple this? Or first they want to take the temperature. What is it? And then they're like, okay, wait, it's 2%. Let's just say, okay, I want to get up 10% in a fiscal year. What do we need to do? What do we need to invest in to be able to do that? Right? Those are signs, right? Or your conversions are low, or sales is telling you that they're spending time educating leads as opposed to talking terms and conditions. There's all these things that are happening in the business. Your KPIs aren't getting met, quarterly goals aren't getting met. Pick one. To me, that's always a key indicator that we need to go understand where are we missing, what are we missing in that buying journey that where we're not influencing them properly, not telling the right story, not showcasing the right thing. So there's a variety of ways, Justin, I think that you could do that. But the key thing is to me, look at the scoreboard for the business. And if you are really missing out and you're not hitting something that you want to hit, that's probably a good indicator that you need to go and start figuring out what the market is saying.
Great insights. And if you're listening and have any of those problems, make sure to contact Ryan. And Ryan, how should people connect with you? How do you want them to connect with you? Learn more about Content
Yeah.
Lift, which is your business.
I'm on LinkedIn too much, an unhealthy amount. So you can find me there. And I answer every DM. So please feel free to connect with me, message me. Happy to help in any way I can. Contentlift.io is my website. And like I said, I have a free list of questions that people can, if they want to do this work on their own, because whether you work with me or not is not the point. The point is I want people to go and do this work because I think they don't understand how much power it gives them as a marketer and how much leverage it gives them to be able to invest properly in their marketing program. So go grab the list of questions, go start talking to customers. If you get stuck, I'm around. Message me. Happy to help.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being on the show, Ryan. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great. I love talking about this stuff. So I appreciate it very much.
Cool. All right, guys. And with that, we'll wrap the show.